All right, without further ado, we're going to get started. So, welcome again, everyone that's kind of just joining in. Um, this is going to be a very exciting webinar. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to be sharing some, just kind of looking at the agenda for today. We're going to talk about AVAIL, right? What AVAIL is. If you're a current customer, I'm sure you're very well, you have great knowledge about what AVAIL is, but if you're brand new, we're going to give some kind of high level overview, some core principles that we like to talk about when talking about AVAIL that really kind of funnels throughout, everything that we're kind of building upon as a content management platform. We're also going to talk about, the big topic today is QA/QC, building better QA/QC workflows for both content and project life cycles. So we're going to be talking about the problem behind that, some things that we've identified internally and talk about quite often about what we want to address. How do we want to build our platform to address a specific need and provide some better tools for QA/QC workflows. And then we're going to get into a demo. We're going to demo some brand new features, some of which are currently in a preview release that are available for select customers to kind of test out and run through some of their own workflows and kind of get a feel for some of this new functionality. And then we're also going to tease some things that will be coming very soon and kind of added into the current preview release. So we're going to be adding some things around content notes. We're going to be adding very soon your ability to harvest detail views and being able to harvest families for 3D previews. So again, all of this is going to kind of combine into what we believe is going to be just a better environment for QA/QC, bringing context to content, making sure that you have the tools to improve that content and give your end users the best experience when they are searching and navigating and bringing content into their projects. We are going to have some time at the very end for Q&A. So if you do have some questions, there is an option for you to kind of post a question. We're going to circle back and knock out as many as we can as we wrap things up. So if you do have a question along the way, feel free to drop that in. For some quick introductions, if you haven't seen me before in a past webinar, my name is Clay Watson. I'm the Director of Customer Success at AVAIL. I'm joined by my colleague, Rob Snyder, our Customer Success Manager, and AVAIL CEO, Randall Stevens. So I'll be kind of going over some of this AVAIL intro, teasing, talking about some of the problem that we've identified and kind of highlighting some of these features that we'll be introducing. And then I'm going to turn it over to Randall to actually demo this functionality and give you a really good look at what this all means. So before we even begin, we are going to try something new with this webinar. So we love to kind of present and we love to get these questions throughout our webinar, but we want to test out some webinar polls. So we put together three questions. The first of which is kind of what piqued your interest the most about today's topic. Is it this problem of QA/QC? Maybe you're looking for a solution and something internally is not working for that workflow. And so you kind of need a platform to help you kind of roll this out for your firm. Is it more around this difference engine, the idea of knowing what's changed in a container file and understanding if that change is important, or if it's maybe about this brand new kind of tease of a feature around content notes, the whole idea around adding context, adding guidance and reference material around the content so that you can have, just a better end user experience. They're more informed. A lot of this information is captured around the content so that they know what is going on, what the context of this content is before they bring it into their project. So we're going to leave this poll question posted. Feel free. It's just a multiple choice to start things off. We'll have two other questions throughout the webinar, which will both be short answer. So we'd love to kind of get your input, kind of get what you're most excited about, and then we'll have some questions kind of throughout this presentation to get more of your feedback because that's very valuable for us. All right, so to give you an introduction and kind of overview of AVAIL, if you are kind of looking and searching around for content management solutions, AVAIL is going to be one that you're going to run into. So we are a standalone desktop application with both plugins for Revit and AutoCAD and Civil 3D. We are very Revit focused. So a lot of the workflows that you're going to see today are around Revit and Revit content, RFAs and RVTs, but we do support DWGs, being able to support block libraries and get a lot of the same functionality that you would get from your Revit files as well. So this is the desktop application. So you can think of AVAIL as your front end library interface. It's a way that you can centralize all of your project information, whether it is Revit content, whether it's branding and logo material, whether it's photography or a precedent library, or maybe even visualization content, Rhino and SketchUp. We support all of these different file types, and this application kind of sits on two very important principles around content management that we kind of leverage to kind of bring you the best platform that we can. So those two principles are these kind of agnosticism principles. So the first of which is that we are file type agnostic. So again, we are Revit focused. A lot of the workflows that we build are for these Revit workflows, finding those assets, bringing them into a Revit project. But we understand that the project, there's many more file types that sit around a project. And those are all important, and those are all made to be centralized right through AVAIL. So we support all these different file types, whether it's a PDF, whether it's, like I mentioned, visualization content, Word documents, anything that kind of is sticky around that project. We want to be able to centralize it into one library, one source of truth. The second principle is another kind of agnostic principle, is that we're file location agnostic. So your current structure, your current file folders and structure can all maintain and be the same. You don't have to change anything in the way your files are structured on your network or your cloud storage service. But we present, AVAIL gives you a nice front end visual interface. So again, if we go back to this concept of channels, you're able to group your content. You can create these graphics and give your end users a better search and better navigation experience across all of this information. So those are the two principles that we kind of sit on top of. We're file type agnostic and file location agnostic. All right, so circling back on the idea of QA, QC, right, and understanding really kind of what drove this new chapter that we're talking about today. And there's a couple different components, right? So it's an understanding of, you know, really some the problem around reusability of content, right? So we kind of broke this down into three different concepts here. So we first identified that, a lot of times this project information is not optimized for reuse. I mean, it's really kind of built for that immediate need for coordination, documentation, and construction. But the reusability is kind of left at the very end and maybe not got to. So it gets into this state where information remains locked inside of a project. And we can all understand that, without kind of a structure and context of where this information is, it's very difficult to find and validate. And it's a lot of effort, time and effort to actually bring it back and to be able to reuse it. So that kind of all leads to this kind of end result that, firms are recreating knowledge unnecessarily from project to project. And we want to be able to provide an interface where that becomes reduced, right? So we were reducing the rework that goes into that knowledge. And we want to understand that there is a way that you can have your content in a platform, but also be able to wrap that content with context, right? So that's very important around what that means to have an efficient project workflow, and then kind of efficient content management library is being able to bring this content in, bring these reusable assets into a centralized location, AVAIL, and then have the context around this content that gives end users this information, and pulls this information along from project to project, because that's where the efficiency comes into play, being able to build this reusable library, and eliminate the need for rework from project to project. So this is kind of the problem, right, that we set out to address, right, with this new chapter. And so we're going to talk about three different facets of and kind of functionalities that we're going to be adding to Avail to help address this problem. So moving on to poll question number two, we're talking about QA, QC, and we'd love to kind of get some insight into how you may be handling this right now. Whether it is a QA, QC of your content library, right? Your standards, how are you kind of going about building out your standards library? Is this an internal struggle? Is it a challenge? Is it something that you find that kind of works, but maybe there's some gaps and ways to kind of improve? Or even if it's on the manufacturer content side of things as well. So thinking about, as you're kind of pulling these assets together, whether it's from a manufacturer or from an old project, how are you going about vetting this content so that it meets your requirements and your standards for your firm, as well as kind of the standards within the project as well. So this is a short answer response. We're going to leave it posted for a couple of minutes. So feel free to kind of jot down, how you're kind of managing this, how you're kind of addressing some of these problems or these challenges around QA QC right now. So for Avail, in response to that problem of these kind of project information being locked away, firms having to, rework and not be able to reuse a lot of these assets from project to project, we wanted to kind of build an environment where it's a lot easier to bring this content forward. So all the different assets that are created within a project for the purpose of that project that may want to be carried forward, we wanted to make a very seamless experience for end users to say, hey, I built this, I made this, and I want this in the library, but it needs to go through a QA QC process. So we've introduced this idea of content submission through Avail. And this is going to be both supported through our Avail for Revit add-in with a simple like right click from the project, the piece of content in the project, and then it gets submitted to the library for review. And we've also added the ability to actually submit files directly into the desktop application. So we've kind of encapsulated this with some permissions. So there is some control around who gets to submit, who gets to review these submissions. But this is this new workflow where end users can submit to the library, have it go into a review stage, and then get approved and denied, right? And then there's this way that you can, open things up, you can review them, and go through your process internally of making sure that they are kind of standardized and cleaned up. We've also added in the Avail difference engine. So this is all around our Avail for Revit add-in, and it's specifically for the harvest process. So you can think about managing your standard detail library in a container file. Harvest is able to extract that library, those elements in the library, and bring it into Avail to make it searchable. You get full text search of your drafting views. You get these high-res previews. And so on top of that, we've added the ability to track all of what's being harvested. And so that way we have a snapshot of what's in the library and we have a snapshot of what's in the container file, and we can actually compare those things and we can tell you, as things are being changed in the container file, how does that reflect back onto the library? What's being changed, who's changing it, and is that change important? Which is very important around the context of what is going on with the content. You want to understand if that change matters and who needs to see that change at the right point in time. And then we're also going to be introducing this idea around content notes. So these are, again, around building context around the content, giving guidance to end users, reference materials, whether it's a link or an attachment that belongs as additional information around the content. And so we're going to be able to demo this. Randall will kind of take control here in a minute and show you what that looks like. And we've got this brand new kind of content window where you can see the content preview, the high-res preview. You can see all of the notes, the references, the guidance, as well as the related content, things that may be connected through the library that all make sense together and are all kind of wrapped accordingly into the same window, which is very, very helpful. So to tease a few things before we kind of jump in, this is kind of a glimpse at what that content submission interface looks like in the desktop. again, you have the ability to control who sees the submissions, who gets to review these submissions, who gets to submit submissions. So we do have some kind of governance around those permissions, but it is something that you can do directly from a project in Revit, or you can actually have the option to actually create a submission directly from the desktop application. We also have the kind of a snapshot of the difference engine. So again, this is looking at my harvest, what's being harvested, what's in the library, what's been published, and then when changes occur in the container file, being able to track that activity, right? Be able to store that history, kind of store that context around what's being changed and who changed it and when they changed it, just to kind of give you a better idea of all these moving pieces around the content, and then kind of what is most important, what needs to be reviewed, what needs to be looked at as these changes occur. And then finally, this is kind of the new content window that I just described. You've got this nice kind of encapsulated content wrapped in context, which is a big point of that QA/QC workflow, is bringing all this information together in one kind of visual window. So you can see some content notes that have been created. You've got the content preview. I added an asterisk around that content preview because something that's coming very soon is the ability to have multiple previews for that piece of content. So you can think about maybe a family having a 3D preview, something that you can actually kind of spin around and look at. And maybe there's a PDF that goes along with a drafting view that you would want to be able to see in both ways. So you can start to think about different previews that you can have around content, the structure of the content note, and then all the related content that kind of all goes together. All right, so that's kind of the intro for Avail. That's kind of a quick breakdown of a little bit more of what we're going to be demoing. So I'm going to hand it off to Randall Stevens to really kind of dive into more of the problem that we are addressing, and focusing on with this next chapter, and talk about this kind of better QA/QC workflows with these new features and functionality.
Thanks, Clay. You guys can hear me? Um, First of all, I'm going to say thanks to Clay because I used to have to give all those intros, and he does such a great job. He's taking the pressure off me that I don't have to lay all that groundwork. But nice job with that, Clay, and thanks for teeing it up. Um, yeah, it's like sitting here waiting. It's almost like a warm up, or I'm a backup pitcher or something, so I have to wait. have to wait my turn. But thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk you through several of these features. I'll start out by saying, though, some of you are been longtime customers on the call, some new, and some hopefully want to be customers. But I'll just start by saying we usually have two large release cycles a year: a mid-year release and a end of year release. And as I'll show you all this, we're a little bit later than we would like to be, by a month or so. But I think you'll see that we just keep piling in a bunch of features that are going to be in this release cycle, so it's going to be worth the wait. We've started last month putting this stuff into what we call preview release, which is what I'm going to be showing you from the builds that are the preview release. But we'll be dropping another preview release either later, sometime this week or first of next week. But we keep kind of adding these new features that we've been working on, and so they're kind of dripping out in these updated release cycles. But hopefully, if you're a customer, get in there and start to grab these and give us some feedback. And we put these things in preview release because we like to get them out sooner than later, get people's feedback on them, and any last minute kinds of things. We can try to get either bugs fixed for sure, but any feedback that we can get early on, we try to roll that in. What I'm getting ready to show you today, though, is a lot, and I'm sure every feature that we have has its own roadmap. So just because it doesn't do something that you could imagine that you would want it to do on this first release doesn't mean that we're done. So with that, I'll kind of walk you through some of the thinking and how this is going to now work. So I'm going to start out with the, actually, Clay, where's, do we have that slide? Hold on. I'm going to let Clay show you.
Yeah, I do.
This is a slide that we've been using in our roadmap, and let me talk to it before I begin showing you these features, and then some of this will make more sense. Clay, if you can pop that back up. So, some of you've seen this because you've been on roadmap calls with me the last few months that we've been trying to use this to talk about the direction. But um, big picture, we've done a lot over the years in building out Avail to be the best in class, you know, library management, how to get back to these reusable assets. And as we're moving forward, this next chapter, as Clay was kind of describing, um, is around us now leveraging that position of knowing what the standard is and what the content that wants to be used in the project, and to begin watching that content as it moves into projects and being able to help now with better QA/QC information, also getting information that's created or edited in the project context back into the library. So this graphic is meant to describe one, that we know that the lifeblood of your all's companies is project work. Everybody's busy, should be fully busy on projects. Libraries, are usually secondary to getting things out the door on the project context. So what we're going to talk about is how do we, through this content submission, make it as easy as possible to begin getting information out of the projects into the flow. And then a bigger picture in the library is, we won't get into it specifically today, but we're really moving towards, especially in larger organizations where there's a lot of different kinds of work being done, that the library is not one monolithic thing. It's actually lots of small libraries. And as we move forward with Avail, we recognize that we're putting in place better tools to let multiple teams manage content and then ultimately feed that up, into what is perceived or viewed as a library, and to make that easier. The other big part of this is, on this content submission, this is one of the first pieces to the next phase, which will come in the next release cycle, which is the suggestion engine. So part of this is, can we understand where information is being used in projects, so that instead of the users having to go search for content, we should be able to see what they're working on, understand the context, and actually proactively bring content forward to them. So I'll just kind of go ahead and say that this concept of archive is likely going to be in the next cycle for our end of year release, because with the archival, which would mean by archival, we'll at least concentrate on the Revit side, meaning never in the future should you ever have to go open up an old Revit project to touch its data. So we're going to be working on how to abstract that away from the project, so that it's searchable and findable, and then ultimately that becomes a source, a potential source for feeding the library and driving those workflows. But more importantly, it's going to be the information that's going to help drive the suggestion engine about what was used in the past, and let that be the first clue to what might want to be used in the future. So we won't get into that today, but that's coming. All right, let me share my screen now, Clay. All right. So let's start with content submission. So we've integrated two things. The content submission and the notes feature are going to be able to be controlled by you as an administrator of your plan as to who can submit things. Do you want to allow everybody in the firm out of their Revit projects to submit things for potential consideration in the library, or do you want to limit that to a small group of people? And we're actually doing the same kind of controls around notes. So when I show you the notes feature, you can either keep the notes capability to a small group of people, or you can actually open that up and crowdsource what it means for people to be able to get this information. So just really quickly, If you go to your profile and account, um, you will be able to go to your features, and what you'll see here is, one, do you even want the submissions feature turned on or off at a account level? And then you can set individually who can submit things, who can create a submission, and then ultimately who are the reviewers of that. So these are completely separate than the publisher consumer roles that those of you that are used to Avail, you can completely control these. So we're doing that for submissions, and we're also doing this for content notes. So you'll be able to who's allowed to contribute. Can everybody create a note, or do I want to limit this to a certain group of people or publishers? So that should be the first thing. On the content submission in the desktop, you will now see a new submissions area. So for me, in this account, I have no submissions sitting here into this flow. Users, if you've allowed users to have some submissions, they will see the new submissions tab in their desktop interface, and they will see a new submissions button. This is what we would refer to as kind of the manual process for submitting. This could be a content request, but it does allow, I'll just drag a couple of files over here. Let's say that I've got a PDF document that I want to put in here, but I might have some supporting documents like a PDF and other supporting files that wants to go with it. We got a very simple for now, I need this content created for project XYZ, whatever that is. They can create a submission. And then when those submissions are created, they will see that in their, continue to see that in their view. For those that are the reviewers of the submissions, they will of course see this in their view, but they will also get this button over here, which shows who submitted it, when it was submitted, where it came from. If I pull down this information and download it, so that data went to a cloud storage location, and now it's been retrieved, but it lets me get access to those source files and all that other information. So I would consider this just a very basic first step for some basic content submission capabilities. I'm sure we'll learn a lot as you all start to get your hands on this, of things that you think would be helpful in that process. So that's the manual means for doing this. The Revit means for doing this, I'm just going to close the desktop down. So here I am in a project. So I'm going to go to like a drafting view that maybe I've created that I think would be good to be in the library. I can view that if I want to view it. I've got this is actually two projects opened up, so I'll call out in a second how my container library is working, but I'm going to start with submission. So if users have been given the ability to submit, they can right click and with one button click, create a content submission on any content in Revit. And I can give a note, this would be useful in the detail library. Create that submission. We're using our harvest capabilities to get this data out of that project. It's being sent again to a cloud neutral location for your account. And I think the important part here is that's all the user has to do. So, it's hard to get people to do things. We tried to concentrate on how easy could we make this. If there's something that they've created that they think's of value, can they get it, submitted back into the operation? So if I go back now to the desktop and I refresh my submissions, I should now see that I have this new submission. You can filter this out by who submitted it. So if Clay had submitted this, I would see who submitted it, and I can filter these out. I can view this by submission date and prioritize it. Again, I can see details over here on the right of when it was submitted, which project it came out of, all of those kinds of things. The note that I had put in there is all available. So, so that's all there for you, and you can publish. If this was a family, it would make more sense that you could just look at it without having to open it up in Revit or do something and just publish it right into your directory. You can do that here. If I click on this, this gives me the option of which channel I want to, where I want that to go on the network, and which channel I want it to basically be published to, or you can decline the submission and give a reason for declining it. what I'm going to show you though is kind of the the more complex workflow that we've built, and then get into things like our difference engine and how this works. So what I'm going to do now is move over to a different project. This project is my container library for my drafting views. So this is my container library for managing all of my drafting views. And the first thing that I'll say is when I go to harvest, I've already set this one up, but we're really in this release cycle, we've moved to a much more managed style or capability for managing the state of things that are in your container library versus that they're in your in Avail kind of public facing. So up till now, the harvest tool has been kind of a one-way trip. Now you can think about that we're actually keeping track of what's in the project, not in the project, what's been published, what hasn't been published. So you can see here that I have in this container library 64 views that have been published and 0 that are now not in a published state. If I go to the settings for this, we've also added the ability not only to track this data, but we can also, you can now filter out and say this container library is really designed for certain kinds of content, and basically don't show me everything else. And then we give you, of course, your other export options and settings that you can have there. So that's all kind of changed. But what I'm going to show you is the workflow that we designed was thinking about this data coming from the project, and that there's a team of people that are now the reviewers of this information. So you'll notice that if I am a reviewer, I can right inside of my Revit plugin see submissions tab. So there is that content that was submitted from Revit, the Revit family, through this flow, and I can see it without having to go to the desktop right inside of here. So if I select that, I can load that right into the project. I can view its details, which is the kind of metadata that we captured around the submission of that. But what I'm going to do is bring this into the current container library. So I'm loading this view. I'll ignore all the errors. So we're pulling that down automatically and loading it into your container library. Our thought there was, if you're going to QA/QC this content, you're going to do it in Revit. You got to open the thing up. You're going to have to take a look at it. You're going to open this up into your container library and decide what to do with it. So here I've brought that now into my container library. So if I went over here to my views and said, show me CMU, oh, sorry. If I could spell CMU, there it was. So you can see that that detail was brought into this current library. So if I go back to my harvest view, so now you can see that I have one unpublished, right? So now there's content in the container file that hasn't been published. You can see that it came through a submission. We've got a bunch of new little icons that tell you more information about the state of this thing. This content is not published. If I didn't have this view open and I came in here, I could just double click and it's going to open that up for me to review it. So I'm going to hit, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to publish this to the channel. So here I add it to the queue and I can hit publish, and let's just go ahead and save the project. So I'm just going to go ahead and publish this, and then I'm going to show you that we're actually tracking these changes and how the diff engine can be used to help you understand the changes in this information. So we're going to get that published, and I am processing related content. So it's writing out the individual components, the detail items as related content on that drafting view. So this will finish up. And this, again, all full text searchable. It's going through the entire normal flow, content flow. So all of this content is, and I should get a message that says that's completed. There we go. All right, so if I go back to look at this now, here's my harvested content. And I'm going to go into here. There's the new, I've got this sorted by last update. So I'm seeing the newest item here. You can see the related content item. There's the drafting view. Here's the related content that's showing up. And you get to see here in a minute how the notes work. But basically, that's the new content view. All right. So I want to go back over here now. And what I'm going to do is, if I look at you'll see that every item has an activity log. So now I can see that this came into the system on this date and time, and it was harvested on this date. But now I'm actually going to go make an edit to this. I'm going to go down here and just going to make this up, but I'm going to say this was 7 5/8. So I'm making a change there. Let me see if I can I change this note? New note here. So I'm just going to make a couple of changes. And when I save this now, what you're going to see in the harvest interface is that we recognize that change because when we published that before, we snapshotted the information about this. And if you look over here now, we know that this has been modified. And if I refresh this, this is our new diff engine in action. We actually had all the technical information about this, and we used LLM AI to bring that technical info back, turn it into a set of notes that make sense, and attached it to that item. So we can see here that there was modified items, text change from 7 7/8 to 7 5/8, and the text change from nothing to new note here. And if I look at the view activity, we'll now see that that modification and the time was there. Notice I haven't published this yet. Um, I will note before I forget it. You don't have to have harvest privileges to have privileges to open up this project and be doing this work. So we have a lot of customers who have a team of people that are working on the content, but somebody else is the one responsible for publishing that into the library and reviewing it. So we actually have a workflow built into here where if I was making those changes, I can actually right click and mark this as ready, meaning I've done the updates and changes to it. I need to tell somebody that it's ready for publishing. So I can mark that as ready. I can give a note if I want to. And then the person that is in the harvest flow now has the ability to see, hey, this was modified, but gone are the days when you had to go ping them and ask them if they were done or all of those kinds of things. We've built all that in so that it's easy to track. Now it's ready for publishing, and I can now queue this up and publish it to the library. Go through that again. So these features came about because we heard from several customers that they were using spreadsheets to try to keep track of this. If they did have multiple people working on the content, they had to now coordinate that, schedule that. You may still tell people what you want them to work on, but it was all a manual process to know when people were done, what had been changed, was it ready to be published, what's been published, what hasn't been published, all of that. So you should find in this release cycle that we've nailed a lot of that ability to automatically track all this and really drive a nice workflow around managing container libraries. A big question, right, that I have is, will people start actually managing their families in container libraries moving forward? Because we can track this stuff in these projects, there may be a lot of benefit to not leaving the content loose out on the network, but having it as part of a container library for publishing. So you can drop into the notes or comments, and when we open this up for questions here in a minute. This. All right. All right, let that finish up and say, okay, we should see these now clear out. My message, There we go. So you can see that cleared out, but if I do the view activity, we'll now see that things were changed. It was republished on this date by this person. You'll know all of this info. It's kind of looks strange because it's just me doing this, but if there were multiple people involved, you'd be able to know who did what, when, and what was changed. I'll just say, as you wrap your head around that difference engine, we're starting out with this feature for drafting views, but in the wings, we've already mapped this for families to do this with family files, with sheets, entire sheets, and with view templates. We've got some new features with view templates. If I get a second, I'll show you. But uh, those will come moving forward. And then the next step is, because we know what the item was in the library, the future of this is we could know in the project context what's been edited or changed in the project context, and can use that same diff engine to be able to tell project teams what's been edited, when it was edited, who edited it, what was changed, all those kinds of things moving forward. So just think about that we've laid a lot of groundwork with this core technology to be able to have a bunch of new features coming in the future around this difference engine. We think it's going to be core to driving QA/QC flows. If you don't know what's changed, how are you going to, everybody's just using anecdotal information that they've heard from somebody if you can't easily, technically track what's changed. So that's there. So that is that capability. If I go back in here, we can see that. Let me refresh this. I'm going to go full screen now with the AVAIL desktop and just show you that. Well, here we go. So I'm going to go into the preview window. You can see that it picked up my new changes. Everything was updated. Those should all be searchable. So if I search for the word note, the word note was in the text on that, as well as these others. But anyway, driving that entire flow. So that's the managed content, the content submission flow, the ability to bring that back into a workflow around your drafting views, and being able to drive that. The next feature that we were going to talk about is notes, and then I'm going to show you a couple of things that are coming late, but I think we're going to get into this cycle. So I'm just going to go into, and I haven't had time to really build out a lot of this, but I'll show you the core feature. So the idea is that that you can basically, for every piece of content, you have the ability to have notes on that content. So if I go in here, let's do this, last updated. So I have some pieces of casework here. If I select a piece of content, if you look over on the right, this icon changed. It used to be the comments, but now we've combined notes and comments. And you can really think about this triad of information as what shows up in our content window: a preview, that content's notes, and its related content. So if I open up the preview for this, we get to see the graphic, or I'm going to tease and show you here in a minute a 3D view of that. I can click and see notes, and I've already put a couple of notes on this, or I could see the related content that was related to that thing. That is the same information that if I click on this and open up what we call the content view, that information now is surrounding this piece of content. I can see the 3D graphic. I can see the related content over on the left. I can see the notes about this. So we're trying to figure out, as you're pulling this information together, how do we give the user everything right in their face that they would need to know or want to know about this. So back to the notes. The first thing is, if I go up to my, we've changed, this used to say application settings, or says application settings, probably in what you all see today. That's changed to settings. And now we have notes. So you're going to have the ability to create groupings of notes to your liking. So like most things in AVAIL, we're going to let you use your own language about what you want to call these things. We've kind of seeded it with some thoughts, but you can add your own, we call these labels. You can create your own labels and decide how you want to organize notes and different kinds of notes. I'll just say, I always catch myself when I say this. Out of the gate, I would call notes kind of just dumb. They don't do anything except display. The reason that we are not putting a lot of structure to those is we want to understand the kinds of notes you have. And the next step for us is that we think the notes can drive downstream actions. So a specific kind of note might drive some kind of activity. Think about the difference engine. Notes might be what feeds the difference engine in a project context to tell you what to look for, or tell an AI agent what to look for. So, or a notification needs to be sent, or hey, there's a certain kind of note put on a piece of content that just got updated in the library. That's a signal to notify projects that have that content in it of something. So we're not quite there, but we're putting all the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. So what you're seeing, the notes feature, again, lets you describe the note. If I'm a publisher, I have publishing privileges, you can create a note, and I'll just show you how easy this is. I'm just dragging a URL that I've got over here. But if I drag that URL in, we create the previews. I think that was the one I'd already created. And you're in control, right? You can say what kind of a note that you want this to be. You can add your own title, do all that. I'm just going to cancel that because I think that I already have that one. And then the other thing you'll notice is you do have, because we're letting your crowdsource notes from multiple people, we now are separating what's official from unofficial. So this little badge means it's certified. So if you look in the editor, there is the ability to verify the status of a note. So that's our way of letting you, and that also bumps it up to the top. What's verified and important versus bumped down below. You also have the ability to pin things up at the top, and then ultimately you can end up hiding them from the users. And then if I just click on this, it's just going to, you didn't see it, but it opened up my browser over here to that location. So that could be an external website, it could be your intranet site, it could be a SharePoint site, it could be where your standard operating procedures are, it could be a link to a video in your training system, it could be anything. So a little bit of this was, we came out with that related content feature, which people started using really not for related content, but more of how can I connect other things to it. Clay will be pushing out some info about how to think about the difference between notes versus related content. But I think it'll make sense when you open up these content views and you understand the notes feature versus related content and those types of things. So, all right, I clicked on something and I'm not sure what it's doing. There it comes. So anyway, you kind of get the gist of that. And the comments still show up over there under a tab now. All right, let me show you just a couple of other quick teases that we're trying to get in under the wire. One is we are working on the ability to have 3D previews of families, and that includes your families. So we're integrating this capability into Harvest. What you're going to see is I've got pieces of content here. This just happens to be Herman Miller Knoll content. But if I open up the preview panel for this, you now see that we can have full 3D previews of this content for review. And actually, let me pull up this piece of content. So you can have full 3D previews. You can publish notes on all of this stuff. So anyway, there's some exciting. So if I open up the content view for this, I don't have any notes on this because then it would make more sense. But oh yeah, I did. I put a basis of design, right, link to the manufacturer's webpage for that deep link to that piece of content, right? So you can think about your interiors teams. This could be very helpful as they build out internal libraries that have connected to manufacturer info and data. Your 3D viewer will show up, and if there had been related content, it would show up right here. So we're really working on this scope, right? What do you see? Do I see all the information I need? I was going to tease something else that we're working on, but I'll save it for the next one. So anyway, that's exciting, the 3D previews. And then the last thing that I'll kind of tease is that on the Revit side, with your drafting views, which we've always supported, we are now working on what we call reference details, which is the ability to export live data, things that were live section cut data out of your projects. And so we're calling these reference views when they're in AVAIL. So you can see full reference details. And if I bring this into a new project, we will transfer all of the 2D transferable detail items, transferable info will come into the project. So people can now publish live section cuts, reference those in AVAIL full, and then bring in the transferable data into either. Actually, let me just show you. So if I go to, let's do this. I'm going to go back to this project real quick and let me bring up a level floor plan. I'm just going to cut a section or something through here real quick. All right, so now let's do a call out. So I'm just going to do a quick call out of this guy. Sorry. Quit. And I'm going to convert this into a detail view. So my view scale, I'll show you as this data is coming in. This is the last stuff that we're seeing if we can get out into this release cycle. But what you're going to see is if I want to bring, let's just say I'm bringing this detail in, I can bring this data from AVAIL over into this project. And what you're going to see pop up, this is literally hot off the presses. You can either load that into another detail view, or you can create a drafting view from it, and we'll automatically create the drafting view, and we'll warn you if the view scale is different. So the one coming in is quarter and versus inch and a half. So I'm just going to load this in here so you can see it, and then we'll change the view scale if we need to. So now what you'll see is I get a placement box somewhere. Come on. It probably wasn't the best. So there you can see I'm bringing that data in. I can place it. And you can see that the scale is all bad, but if I change the scale here, let's just do, I don't know what the scale was of this thing. Whoa, wrong way. Right, you can get your scale adjusted, but we brought over all that 2D data. So hopeful that you guys will give us some good early feedback on this. We're going to try to get, actually this should be out in this release cycle, the update of our preview release, so you all can start playing around with that and letting us know, what needs to be changed or how that could be improved. So there you go. So that's a biggie. I think a lot of people should get a lot of good use out of that. And so with that, I'll shut up and let's see if we can answer any questions.
There are, I typed an answer to one question, but the rest were definitely, you should discuss them. So if you like, I can read the questions.
Sure.
I'm pitching now to you guys. This is great. Can you bulk add content? Open up a submission page, select the families in Revit, or drag and drop in family files from your network and send everything over at once.
Yeah, one submission. there's no, I'm sure there's some theoretical limit to how many files you could attach, but you could attach multiple files to one submission if you wanted to, if that's what he meant. Yeah.
Next one is how does the content submission handle different Revit versions?
It'll tell you which version it is. I mean, it's coming out of a project, so it's going to come as a version, and you can't go backwards. So you're going to know which version it came out of. That's part of the details that show up there.
And if it always, you can always send us emails to continue the discussion. So support@getavail.com. Next question is, does the QA/QC only work with single submissions of views or content, or can we do a full model upload and obtain the information? I guess that refers to the difference.
No, I mean we're doing the difference engine. Operates on an element by element basis. A family compared to another family, or a drafting view compared to another drafting view, at its basis. As we move this technology forward and think about a project, we'll be able to do that at every element, and then use the AI engine to roll that data up into what's changed on the project at that kind of scale. So you're not going to like submit an entire project and compare that. As we get into archive, that gets interesting to think about our archive feature and how we would know. I mean, part of it is just when are you snapshotting and what are you comparing it to? What state is it in versus when you want to compare it? But so open to more. This should open up lots of those kinds of conversations and discussions about what would be helpful. So
next one is, can everyone using the content that I updated automatically get notified that the content has been updated, so they're aware if they need to reload?
Yeah, that's I was just kind of teasing that is not, the notifications are not in this release, but that's what we were thinking about, the way the notes are going to work and the way that this publishing works. And that'll be next, is can we use that information to drive a notification downstream, knowing that content's now in the project. We can notify them. The diff engine is interesting, and the notes are interesting, because if you've published notes, that helps the user know what changed. What do I need to do with this information to bring it in the project? So we're kind of sequentially baby stepping our way towards the how do we now know where this content is and drive notification system. So.
And the follow-up was that the question referred to if I publish a revised detail, everyone using that detail gets notified automatically instead of me manually sending it to each project team.
Yeah. So we'll want your all's feedback. We'll have a lot of questions about how notifications should work and who should get notified and when. And we're, as most of you know, we've just been very cautious about being noisy with information. So by that we mean, if you're just blasting stuff out, we've all experienced it, you start ignoring it. So we're going to be very deliberate about understanding severity of notifications, general information, and then how to do that. And this don't it's not going to be limited. Could we send an email? Yes, you could send an email, but we're looking at being able to do badging in the app or notifications in the app. So if you're and narrow, what I like to say, narrow casting that information. We don't have to badge everybody. We know who's done that, and we can alert them in the project context what needs to be looked at, who needs to look at it. So there's a bunch of things to think through, but we're working on that.
Are you thinking about some of the management tools for organization palettes as well?
Well, we kind of already have it. Palettes and org palettes, you can turn those on. Your users can create palettes. We didn't give you the ability to not let the users create palettes. That's why we started with the user palettes, but you do have the ability to move those up to what we call org palettes, and that's publishers are the ones in charge of that, if that's what they were getting at.
Follow up on the question, please, Bonnie, if that didn't answer the question. Next one is, am I correct in understanding that changes made in a detail once the detail is published would be able to be tracked in any project file that used that detail, letting us know it would need to be updated in a project file.
That's the next step. Yes, we will have that capability, but
Does
it's not in this cycle.
Next one is, does this improve the thumbnail on harvesting, not needing a separate JPEG creation?
Yes, and that reminds me, I didn't say, part of this release cycle is we're actually creating PDFs as well in that process. So the future of your drafting views is a PDF in that viewer, which gives you full PDF controls for printing and doing all of those things. And just to hint at what's next, we're working on a Bluebeam integration. So part of getting the PDF there is the ability to drive with palettes a workflow around Bluebeam sessions, markup, redlining, and moving that data on downstream. So I think there's some really cool stuff that you'll see coming next.
Question on callouts and references in a container file. Is it supported now? Oh, this is the issue we discussed in the past about reference links.
Well, that's very difficult when you're referencing something. If you're bringing something into a new project that doesn't exist in the other, right? So yeah, maybe we have to. I think the answer is no, it's not in here, and it's a complicated thing.
But let's keep discussing it, please. Call us back. Next is with the difference engine, if you uploaded content not using harvest, is there a workflow to harvest through a container without making duplicates?
Read that again.
With the difference engine, if you uploaded content that's not using harvest, without harvest, is there a workflow to harvest through a container without making duplicates from a container?
I think maybe what they're getting at is you don't want to bring duplicate data into your container library. So if that's the question, then the question is, can we tell you when there's things that are similar? We are working on the back-end technology to do exact matches and similarity matches searches. So part of what we're envisioning is as content comes out of a project into that submission flow, what you'd really like to be alerted is this already exists in the library. Don't bring it in and create a duplicate. So that is rule number one. But we're also we're working on similarity, so we can tell you how similar it is, and we can use the diff engine information to actually tell you what differences are. So yes, next phase of this will be to start giving you better information to make better QA/QC design flow decisions about this information coming in.
Next one is with the submissions feature, are we able to turn this on but limit the users that have access to it?
Yes.
Yeah. And
same with notes.
Next, might be off topic. Are you looking at harvesting view types soon? I think you're referring to, say, wall sections, plans, sections, and so on. Let us know. But I think conceptually they're the same as the detail views. It's just very.
Yeah, you can. There's just there's usually not detail items to come over. So we're also looking at I think Rob, you'd had a conversation with one of the customers about the ability to actually bring the image in as a PDF so that you could trace over top of it. So there's some things like that we're experimenting with right now. So we'll have a deeper conversation on that.
Is the webinar being recorded?
Yes, it better be. I'm not doing this twice.
Next is, I've wanted a way to bring user attention to new content that has been added to the library. Some sort of a badge and a way to filter those might work.
Well, you can filter already. Here, let me share my screen again because I'm going to show you one more thing. The famous one more thing. Yeah, so already in your desktop, you have the ability to sort by when it was updated or when it was added. So actually, users can see data added so they can see new content versus, and they can filter that either way they want to. Editors of the channel see last updated, which is helpful for when you're doing QA/QC work and you've made modifications. So the content's not necessarily new to the library, but maybe you made some modifications to tags or republished over top of it. So so that's a difference, but that's already in there. And then let me just show you one other quick thing, and then we'll see if there's any other questions there, Rob. But we've supported harvesting view templates for quite some time now. But when you load those view templates, if that view template already exists, it would create a duplicate. So it was really good for starting a project if you wanted to thin your template out and put the view templates in AVAIL and start a project by loading them from scratch. It wasn't so useful if somebody has screwed up your view templates, which apparently happens all the time, and you wanted to update those with the standard. So we now have that capability. So I'll demo that real quick. So I'm going to take this view. We can see that the architectural plan view template is what is referencing. And if let me just make a crazy, let's try something. Model display. So let's just change this. I'm just going to exaggerate so that you can see. But if I apply this to shaded view, and I've now screwed up your template, applied it, any of those changes, right, that's happened there. So now you have to find out who changed what, what did it affect. Our standard view templates aren't being loaded. So if we look at this, those view templates, we can see that they're, hold on, manage. So we can see that there is an architectural plan, which is right there, which is what that one that I just edited. So now in AVAIL, if I've published, which I did, they live in here. So now let's say that I've got this architectural plan, which is here, view template published. If I go over here to the project and load it, it's now going to ask, hey, this already exists. Do you want to replace it? Right? Which is going to delete and replace the current one. Or do you want to load this, which would make a duplicate, or do you want to skip loading it at all? But basically, we recognize that it already exists. If I replace it, which is what a lot of you have been asking us for, then this gets loaded. And as soon as I do that, it's updated back to the standard. This, we had a bug in this today, or I'd show you, but think about now using our org palettes to create standard view templates as part of an org palette, and then bulk loading those at the click of a button, right, to load and update back to your standards on all of this. So we'll get that cured and into this release as well, but another new feature. So this was one of those, Rob, if you've got any other questions, we can kind of dive into those, but this has been a feature packed release cycle for us, just a lot of new things that are here. So we're excited for you.
Which generated a lot of great questions. There are 4 more. Follow up on the palettes or organization palettes. Can we track submission requests and edits to that collection similar to the management workflows shown for the new harvest features?
Like tracking the changes on a palette? Is that what?
So submission, let's see, I'll read it again. Following up for the palettes, for organization palettes, can we track submission requests and edits to that palette similar to the management workflows shown for the new harvest features?
So the workflow for, so I'm going to guess at what they're asking. Somebody wants a change or suggestion to something on an org palette. The workflow that you can use today is they can go grab a personal palette and add things to that personal palette and share it with you if you're the publisher. And you can now add those things to one of your org palettes, transfer, copy that data over. But it's basically let the user go do, and then elevate it up to you to say either convert this to an org palette or add these things to an existing org palette. So, if there's more sophisticated things that are needed than that, then yeah, we'd like to hear the use cases and think about it. But
yes, just restating, always reach out to us with your ideas and needs. We'll discuss in depth with you. Next is
we'll warn that they go into a list of 1,000 that we then sort and try to put into these buckets of what we're working on. So, yeah.
Yeah. Does it have to be a detail view, or will the new export section views or plan views with detailed components added?
Yeah, you should be able to export anything that's got that data. We were testing it on some plans the other day, and just so those just don't have any data to transfer, but you can get them out. So yes, anything that you can take a view, you should be able to publish. And then the question is there any 2D data that's transferable? And until we get figured out how you would want to bring the full thing in, like as a reference, like as a PDF, or how that data is going to come over. We've also been experimenting with taking the cut data as 2D vector data, how that's stored, and the possibility of actually bringing 2D vector data back in of your section cuts and those kinds of things. But we're just kind of baby stepping and trying to learn, what preferred workflows that people have.
And the last two questions, for more info on my first question, we uploaded through our back of house individual files. So if we harvest the same content from a container, it would make a duplicate. Is there a way around this, or would we need to reharvest and delete the duplicates?
Talking about families, is that what it was in reference?
I forgot.
I mean, if you've indexed files off your network and then you bring those, let's just say it's families, they're sitting on the network, and then you bring them into a container library and then publish them, you can just you can just delete the others from your channel, or start a new channel and push this in and then do the old switcheroo. It's like you could name the channel the same thing, and at the same time you turn this one on, turn the other one off, and nobody's going to know any wiser what they're looking at or where it came from. So I don't know. I mean, if there's some specific things, the team here can help, coach you through.
Yep, you got a right. Good point, Randall. Thanks.
Yeah.
Last question. We can export, or can we export a list of what content is in one channel? I want to compare the list of families in an old archived channel and the list of families in a new channel.
You can use the tag IO to do that, to get that data spit out, and then you can compare those in a spreadsheet or do whatever you would need to do. So that's there. I will bring up that the notes are there's full analytics around all of this. So your notes, you'll see analytics not only on the publishing of the notes and creation of notes, but consuming of notes. So there's full analytics capability there as well. And then I think we've got the content submission has analytics around it as well. So
No other questions?
victory.